Thank you, Roxy. Welcome again to everyone. We're so glad that you're here for a particularly relevant topic right now. And welcome, of course, again, and thank you to our speakers. They are tremendous resources and a source of really important information on those topics, and they've been so kind to make themselves available tonight, and it sounds like long afterwards, so we're really lucky. Our first speaker will be Mary Rubenis, and she represents the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, and she's going to talk to us tonight about understanding better the benefits and in particular, a certain kind of savings plan that really helps and to benefit families with disabilities in our state, and she coordinates the educational outreach toward that effort. So she will be speaking and then take some questions from families as they come up. Followed by our second speaker from the Volunteer Lawyers Project, Stephanie Biggs, and she is going to be talking about really the ins and outs of how Massachusetts law works regarding guardianship, obtaining one, all the documents that are necessary to even begin that process. So we're really lucky. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Mary, and she will give, I'm sure, an even finer introduction. So thank you so much. And we'll again stop for questions after each speaker and then see what time we have left afterwards. Here you go, Mary. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just going to make sure the sound is going to work. Share sound. So hopefully this should be fine. I'm going to move this up just so we can start this thing. Okay, perfect. All right. I will try to speak slowly. So I pace myself. So thank you for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be here and to present to all these Boston public school families. Like Kelsey mentioned, my name is Mary Rubenis, and I work for MEFA. And I'm here tonight to talk about Attainable, which is the Massachusetts Able Savings Plan. It's offered by MEFA, and the accounts are managed by Fidelity Investments. And I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of what these accounts are for, what the eligibility is for these, why they're beneficial, some of the qualified expenses that you can use an Able account for, and then lastly, just give you some resources at the end that are super helpful that you can go and just learn more about the accounts. So a little bit, I'll just share, let's pop to the next screen here. Oh, here we go. A little bit about me, I'm just gonna minimize me. A little bit about me and what I do. Kelsey mentioned, I coordinate outreach and education around Attainable, which is an Able account. Attainable is just the brand name, but it is an Able account. So my role is really to coordinate outreach to local organizations, state organizations, to spread awareness about Able accounts and their benefits. And these accounts are really beneficial for someone with a disability. They offer so many benefits, and I'll get into some of those as we go along. And the great thing about these accounts is that you can open it yourself. You don't have to hire someone to do it for you. That's one advantage that these offer as well. I'm super passionate about helping families and individuals with a disability. Like I mentioned, I do these trainings on Attainable throughout the state. And then lastly, but most important probably, is I am also a mom of a daughter with a disability. So I understand how challenging it is to find resources. And I have been on this similar journey as many of you, and still am trying to find resources that can help her in the best way. So I'm always available to answer any questions. So I usually start and just share a little bit about MEFA and what our organization is and what we do. So we are a nonprofit state authority that was created back in 1982. And our mission is to help families plan, save, and pay for college. As simple as that. And how we do that is we're really just a free resource around all of that, from applying to school, financial aid, saving for college. We offer a couple of tax advantage savings accounts. Attainable is one of those. We're also the state sponsor for the Massachusetts 529 College Savings Plan. And then lastly, we also do private student loans as well. If you're not familiar with MEFA, I definitely encourage you to go to the site. It's mefa.org to learn more. And you can actually sign up for emails that are really helpful by grade level. So depending on what, what grade level each of your students might be in, you can sign up by grade level, and then we send emails tailored to that specific grade level that are super helpful. I tell people they're really great content that we push out weekly. So I encourage you to sign up for the emails if you would like to do that. And then a little about Fidelity and this partnership with MEFA and how this came about. Attainable, or the Massachusetts Able Savings Plan, was launched in 2017. And like I mentioned, we're the state sponsor. Fidelity Investments is the program manager. But our partnership with them dates back to 1999, when we selected Fidelity to serve as the program manager of the U Fund, which is that 529 college savings plan I just mentioned. They have been a great partner for us on the ABLE accounts. Also, obviously, in the 529 college savings, they're very committed in this disability space. And together, they really offer expertise around, obviously, their money management expertise and with our expertise in college financing and college planning. So it's been a great partnership, and I usually just like to share a little of how that came about. So let's get into the nitty gritty about ABLE and how this all came about. So the ABLE Act, or the Stephen Beck Jr. Achieving a Better Life Experience, or ABLE Act, ABLE is the acronym, amended the federal tax code back in 2014, and it added this section 529A, which is an ABLE account. And the legislation established these ABLE accounts, which are tax-exempt accounts for an eligible individual with a disability to use these accounts for qualified disability expenses while still keeping your eligibility for federal public benefits like SSI or Medicaid. You don't have to be receiving those benefits to have an ABLE account, but if you are, there are huge benefits if you get those benefits in. If you haven't, in order to keep those, you need to have an ABLE account or a special needs trust. And so there's huge benefits if you do get those benefits to having an ABLE account or a special needs trust. So how do you become eligible for one of these? Essentially, the disability has to have occurred prior to the age of 26. And then if the individual is getting SSI or SSDI due to their disability, they're eligible to open one. Or you meet the age requirement prior to age 26. You have a disability that Social Security has a list of compassionate allowances. If it's in one of those, you would meet the requirement. Or lastly, you're self-certifying that you have a diagnosis of some type of physical, mental health, intellectual, developmental disability. Again, that Social Security lists some of these in what they call their blue book. You would be eligible to open an ABLE account. So it's the age requirement prior to 26 if you are getting those benefits, or if you're self-certifying that you meet, a diagnosis that meets the requirement, then you're eligible to open an ABLE account. Some of the qualified expenses for ABLE accounts, this is a broad list. It's not exhaustive. There's definitely things that will fall outside this, and I'll give you an example of that. But in general, it's things like you can use the accounts for healthcare, for housing, education, transportation, assistive technology, if you need an iPad to communicate, employment training, personal support services like a PCA, and then lastly, basic living needs. So things like food or clothing, you can use your ABLE account to pay for that. A good example of something that's not on this list that you could use it for, many of you obviously are parents, and so if you had a child that needed to go to therapeutic camp in the summer, could you use the ABLE account for that? Absolutely, because obviously it's disability related. So list is broad. This is a general category expenses, but certainly there are things that can fall outside of this. And so some of the benefits of having an Attainable or an ABLE account, it allows the account owner or beneficiary, and that is the person with the disability, so they are the account owner or beneficiary on an ABLE account, to save over $2,000 without affecting federal benefits. So currently, if you get these federal benefits like SSI, You can't save over $2,000 without it impacting those benefits. An ABLE account allows you to save over that amount by having it in the ABLE account, and essentially the money is protected. The account is owned by the individual with the disability. Anyone can contribute to one of these accounts, including family or friends, obviously the person with the disability. It provides immediate access to the funds, so it really operates like a checking or a savings account. The funds are in the ABLE account, and then when you're going to pay your bills, you would move it from ABLE to, say, your personal checking account, and then pay your bills. And then lastly, it provides an individual with a disability. It's really about providing financial independence, financial literacy, and there are multiple tax benefits that I'll talk about in another slide that come with these accounts. And then on this slide, I also want to mention, many of you have children that are under 18. So if the individual who is the account owner can't manage the account themselves or is a minor, you can set up the account in such a way to have what's called a PSA, or person with signature authority, on the account. And that has to be a parent, a guardian, or a power of attorney. So if you were setting up an account for your child, and the child would be the account owner, and then a parent or a power of attorney, a parent, a guardian, or a power of attorney could be the PSA on the account. So I just want to mention that while we're on this slide, that you can set it up that way. Some of the sort of account specifics to our program, and some of this is across the board nationwide. This first bullet point is one of those. The total annual contribution that you can put into an ABLE account currently for any ABLE plan is $15,000 in a calendar year. If the person who owns the account is working, if they're employed, the beneficiary can then add an additional up to $12,760 each year from their earnings on top of that $15K. So potentially the annual contribution could increase to $27,760. That's if they're working. There's some caveats with that. You can't be participating in the employer's retirement plan and also take advantage of this tax benefit of adding more money, but it's an option that exists. And then for our program, the max that you can save in one of these is $500,000 in an Attainable account. And then if you are getting SSI, it's not suspended. You can save up to $100,000 essentially with no impact on your SSI. Once the account goes over that, they'll suspend your benefit until you drop back under. And then lastly, no annual account fee on our program. So there's no annual fee associated with it. So you're investing in the market when you open an ABLE account, and you're picking a portfolio, you're picking portfolios. This is a screenshot of what they look like. They're a mix of stocks and bonds, short-term securities. The portfolios that are more conservative and tend to have a lower risk are at the top of the chart. You can see there's a money market, and that essentially has a very low risk. And obviously they tell you on this slide, you know, the more aggressive portfolios that have a greater risk, potential for a higher return, are toward the bottom, and those are going to have a higher percentage of stocks. And then of course they're telling you, you know, these units are, mutual fund securities, so they're subject to the market fluctuation and volatility. It's going to be based on your risk tolerance, what you might select. The folks at Fidelity can help you with the selection, and you can go to the Fidelity site to learn more information regarding the portfolios and to answer more questions about selection. There are fees on the portfolios. Like I mentioned, there's no annual account fee on the program, but there are investment fees on the individual portfolios, and they range from 0.57% of the assets to 0.94, so less than 1%, similar to fees that your bank might be charging you for a checking account. There are fees on these portfolios as well. So some of the tax benefits I wanted to mention, the first one is this ABLE Financial Planning Act. And so essentially, it allows you to roll over from a 529 college savings plan into an ABLE account with no tax or penalty up to $15,000 in a calendar year, provided the beneficiary is the same individual on both accounts. So sometimes parents or grandparents might have opened a 529 college savings plan for a child and then realize they're not going to go to school, well, now they can roll over that money from a 529 into an ABLE account up to the 15,000 with no tax or penalty. Or one beneficiary is a family member of the other. So if you had a sibling that had a 529 and you wanted to roll it into a sibling's ABLE account, you can do that up to the 15K. And then another tax credit to highlight, it's something called the Savers Credit. And so an ABLE account owner meeting certain criteria based on how much they're earning, their gross income, they can potentially take a tax credit, tax credit on their contributions into their ABLE account up to a certain dollar amount. I believe it's 2,000 for a single person, and you're eligible to take this if you're 18 or older, not a full-time student, and not claimed as a dependent on another person's tax return. But essentially, it's a tax credit you can take on your federal taxes. And then, as long as withdrawals you're spending that for qualified disability expense, any account growth or any money you're making in this account is federal income tax free. So you're not paying taxes on the earnings. And also in Massachusetts, there is no Massachusetts state income tax on the earnings or the account growth as well. So that's huge, which differs from a regular bank account. You're paying taxes on those accounts that you're making, earnings in the accounts. This is the video I wanted to share with you tonight. This is someone I've met in my journey. His name is Brian Guay. He has an account and he has a really powerful story to share. And I met him and his mom through a counselor through Mass Rehab Commission. And we were able to share his story, and CNBC did a story on Brian, and then locally Channel 5 did a story as well. So I thought I would share his story and play the video so you could just learn a little bit more about Brian and how the account has been beneficial for him.
That's me.
Brian Guay can picture his future.
This is my brain's idea. Brian Austin Guay is the next generation in a long line of farmers.
Brian may have autism, but today at age 25, Brian only accepts two labels, artist and farmer.
I'm gonna have my farmer's business someday.
To achieve that dream, his mom Ann explained he needed a plan.
So he got this idea that he should be able to save money.
Brian also got 3 jobs.
This is my work schedule.
6 days a week, Brian works at Home Goods, a goat farm, and a horse barn. But for people with disabilities, saving those paychecks can be complicated.
Brian benefits from a lot of public services, and there were restrictions as to how much money he could have in his name.
That changed in 2014 with a federal law nicknamed the ABLE Act. It provided a new option for people with disabilities to build a fund for both short-term and long-term expenses.
You can save, and the interest that you earn on these accounts is not taxed.
Similar to a 529 plan for college funds, MEFA offers an ABLE account called the Attainable Savings Plan. It has no minimums, no fees, and there are no worries about losing Medicaid or supplemental security income benefits. Fidelity manages the investment portfolio, but unlike a 529 plan, ABLE account holders can withdraw amounts at any time without penalty.
Right around 3,000 folks have begun to save. We're seeing the average account balance is about $8,000, which is pretty healthy when you consider it's a relatively short time frame.
Now that Brian has an account, he deposits about $1,000 each month from his paychecks.
He's saved a substantial amount of money. And our dream is to look into other opportunities, whether that be we purchase a farm, we buy an interest in something, that he'll have choices.
In the meantime, Brian sets his alarm for 5:30 every morning. He says it's good practice.
I wake up every day because I'm farmer.
Saves $1,000 a month. That's through hard work. Like 529 accounts, relatives and friends can also make contributions to one of these ABLE accounts. For more information about how to open one, you can check out our WCVB app.
All right. And then here are some resources I talked about in the beginning. There are over 40 ABLE plans now nationwide that you can choose from. You don't have to choose your home state. although we do tell people usually you should look to your home state first, because our home state may offer you some additional tax benefits that an out-of-state plan wouldn't. A great place to learn more about ABLE is this ABLE National Resource Center, or ablenrc.org. It's a phenomenal site to learn everything about ABLE. They do webinars. If you're on social media, you can follow them on social. There's just a lot of information there to learn more about the program, and just more detailed information about ABLE accounts there as well. Also on the MEFA site, MEFA.org, we have a dedicated landing page for Attainable. That same thing, goes over the entire program and all the benefits to it. Lastly, to open one of these accounts, you go to fidelity.com/ABLE. To open one of these accounts, you can do it online. It's a pretty easy process to do, maybe about 30 minutes or even less, 25 minutes once you're familiar with, like I mentioned, the portfolios. And then lastly, if you want to sign up for emails related to Attainable, we have a link on the MEFA site as well that you can do that. It's program updates to, Attainable, or new information about ABLE accounts. There's legislation pending that they're going to raise the age of eligibility from potentially 26 to 46, things like that. Also, when we do blog posts related to disability related content, you would get those as well. And I think the next slide is just my contact info. This is my email at MEFA, mrubenis@mefa.org. And then these are the channels on social that you can find us: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please check us out there if you're on any of those, and follow us for all the content that we push out, in addition to the content related to Attainable. So I think that's my last slide, Kelsey. I know I can see a bunch of things in the chat.
Thank you so much. Yes, I saw a couple of those initial questions come about in the chat. If you can see them and want to take them as you see them, that sounds great. Otherwise, I'm happy to read them as well.
I can stop screen sharing. Let's see, go back.
So I will say that one
sure.
question that started out there is about if it's only in Massachusetts. I think you just answered that do it in your own state, so we know it's beyond Massachusetts. And then following that in the chat, and please remember you can raise your hand to ask live too, but I just pulled some from the chat so that they were readily available. And what the next one is: are children in foster care or residential programs congregate care eligible?
Yeah, so the question about, it's not just for Massachusetts residents. In fact, Attainable is available nationwide, so you don't have to be a Mass resident to open an Attainable account. So that answers that. In terms of the foster care, it's not related to, it's really related to whether they qualify based on their disability. So as long as the disabilities occurred prior to 26, they meet, if they're getting benefits, SSI or SSDI, then they meet the eligibility. Or if they're meeting one of those disability conditions that Social Security deems to be, a disability that qualifies, then they would, meet the requirements to open an ABLE account.
What about, Mary, if just as a follow-up to that, if did the funds for a child in foster care move with that child, or are they linked to, the host of that child at any given time? I know that was a third question, I think.
I'm not sure what you mean in terms of the funds. I guess, sorry, go ahead.
The question was just, I think, as a follow-up to the one Roxy read about, foster care or congregate care settings, is whether how the funds move with a child who might be in one of those settings.
Yeah, so essentially it's really if the child qualifies, and if they can't manage the account themselves, then you have to have a PSA or that person with signature authority, and then that individual would manage the account for that, for the beneficiary. If the child moves, out of foster care, there's no impact. They're still eligible for an ABLE account. If they meet the eligibility to open one, then they're eligible, and they're eligible to have an ABLE account.
Excellent. I'm looking to see.
Another question that was also there, someone said they're in the beginning stages of getting guardianship for their child and wanted to know if they would still be able to open that ABLE account as her PSA, now currently as her parent, not guardian yet.
Yeah, so you can be a parent and be a PSA on the ABLE account.
Interesting.
Yeah,
What-
and then is there a minimum or maximum deposit to the account? No, nope, there is not.
What about another question is how somebody would self-certify or take that part on?
Yeah, so essentially, we have tried to make our program pretty, I guess, accessible in terms of, we're just, people can essentially self-certify that they meet the requirement to open one of these. And that just means that you're saying, hey, I meet the requirements to open this ABLE account. I meet the age requirement eligibility, and I'm meeting one of these disability requirements, whether it's physical, mental health, intellectual developmental disability. I'm meeting one of these disabilities that Social Security deems to fall in their blue book or functional limitations. Then you say, I'm going to open the account, and we tell people you should certainly, you don't need the documentation to open the account, but you should certainly have it in your files at home. And that would be, a letter from an MD stating that this individual has this disability.
And what about, I'm just reading an additional question about if a family who has a child with the disability does not receive SSI or Social Security benefits, can they open the account?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be getting benefits to have an ABLE account as long as you meet the qualifying criteria, or as long as that disability meets the qualifying criteria. And this disability has occurred prior to the age of 26, then you're eligible to open an ABLE account. You don't have to be getting benefits to open one of these, but if you are, that's a huge benefit, right? Because you can't save over $2,000 unless you have an ABLE account or a special needs trust without it impacting your benefits. But you don't have to be getting benefits to open one of these. You can still open it and take advantage of the tax benefits to it.
Okay. And I see one more, Roxy, help me out here if you see anything following, but for a parent whose child is about to sort of age out at 17 or getting close to that 18-year mark, who is not the guardian, how will that change the parent's ability to manage the ABLE account for that child once they're 18? I mean,
yeah. So if the child needs someone to manage the account for them, then they would have to, again, parent, guardian, and power of attorney would have to be set up as a PSA on that account.
super.
And the next question is also, can it be any disability, or is there a list of disabilities, or is any disability?
Yeah, so Social Security has something called a blue book that lists, their sort of, qualifying disabilities. So people can go there and look, for what that list might include. And they have something called a list of compassionate allowances. People can look there as well. They also have a document called, not to share too much information, but it's called the POMS, or POMS, or Program Operation Manual System, that goes into great detail about ABLE and how it interacts with Social Security. And again, that, the MEFA site has a lot of information, obviously under our program, but also ABLE National Resource Center has a ton of information that you can go and just learn more about ABLE, and just the ins and outs of the accounts, essentially. And they do webinars all the time as well.
Super.
And then is there a difference? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Kelsey,
Oh,
but is there a
sorry.
difference between an ABLE account and a special needs trust? And do they have income limits, meaning the parent income also, as far as being able to participate in?
Yeah, so the difference between an ABLE account and a special needs trust, that's a complex question. I'm certainly not a financial planner, but to sort of, or just to sort of, I guess, give a brief distinction between the two. First of all, I tell people they're both great tools. If you can take advantage of using both, definitely do so. The difference, I guess, in a nutshell, is that ABLE has differences in terms of how much you can put in a calendar year. So 15,000 is the cap that you can put in, whereas you can put in more than that essentially in a special needs trust. A trust can also, I believe, take things like cash or real estate. You can't put cash or real estate into a ABLE account. So they differ in that way. They differ in sometimes how you can spend it. Like an ABLE account, you can pay your housing expense directly from it. I believe with the trust, you can't do that, or else if you're getting benefits, there potentially may be a penalty, say, on your benefits. So, but they can work also really nicely together. I know you can move money from the special needs trust into your ABLE account and then pay your housing. So there are distinct benefits to each, and they have differences as well. So.
Thank you so much.
Kelsey, before we move on, just the last part about parent income, does that impact it?
Yeah, so there's no income requirements to open an ABLE account, so no.
All right, thank you. So I just want to, thank you very much, Mary, and I hope you'll be able to stay so that if people have additional questions. Before we transition to the next speaker, there are two things that I just want to touch base with the group about. One is in the chat, I'm just going to throw in for purposes now, because I know people come for different amounts of time. That is our Google form that will allow you to sign in and also give feedback on the presenters. So at any time you can open it and be able to fill that out. The other thing that I just want to make sure that our members, Special Education Boston families know about too, is that's a link to the tiered focus monitoring review that will be occurring in Boston about special education. This will we have a meeting next week, which is Thursday, May 6th, from 7 to 8, where the State Department of Education will come and they will speak to us basically about how do they evaluate special education in Boston. And they will also speak to families about the survey they're going to be sending to family members. And then they're available to listen, to hear what your concerns are, and to answer questions about the review. So I've put a link in the chat to the flyer. It is posted on our website, and BPS is supposed to be sending it out directly to all families. It's currently being translated, but please pass the word. We want to make sure special education families are able to raise concerns, ask questions, and make this review really valid for us about what is going on in Boston with special education, so it can be reviewed appropriately. So those two things are in the chat. I just wanted to pause to share that information just in case people are floating in and out, and we'll share it again at the end of the meeting also. But I will pass it now to Kelsey to transition us to our next speaker.
Thank you so much. And Mary, that was excellent. I think really, really helpful. And Mary, of course, has been gracious enough to share, as Roxy said, her details. So please, please get in touch, ask questions. There's nothing too simple, basic. That's why she's here. That's why we're here. So Mary, thank you again. And next, of course, Stephanie will be talking again about guardianship, and more specifically, how to get your ducks in a row, all the documents you might be thinking you need, not even knowing about yet, so that becomes a more seamless and less intimidating process. And as you know, she's here from the Volunteer Lawyers Project. So I'll turn it right over to her, and then we'll keep track of the questions just as we did with Mary. Thanks so much, Mary, and welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Mary, I want to thank you. I have learned so much tonight that I can just give your website to some of the clients we have. I'm so grateful. I am so glad that you went first. I've copied down a whole bunch of information, so you may be getting a lot of calls and emails. I hope that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Good.
No, I'm thankful. Yeah, I'm glad. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to cover. So I know.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. I tell people you have to hear it more than once, because it is probably overwhelming to hear it all, so thank you, Stephanie.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to screen share, and I'm going to put up something called a clinical team report. And as I do that, I'm going to tell you that there are two different kinds of medical documentation that you need to get guardianship of an individual in the Commonwealth. And I know Linda and Melita, you're a board member, and you mentioned that you got guardianship of 2 individuals. So Kelsey, I don't know if you have guardianship now, but what I would like is if anybody has some suggestions and thoughts as I go through my presentation, please feel free, because it helps me give a better presentation. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do my screen share with my clinical team report. Okay. All right, I'm a little new to this, so please bear with me. Okay, so I'm hoping everybody can see this. Yes? Somebody, Kelsey, I want a yes
Yes,
from you.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect.
Here for you, Stephanie. We can see it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so if you have an individual for whom you need guardianship and there has been a developmental disability from a very early age, you're going to need to file a clinical team report. And here's why. In order to get guardianship of somebody, you have to prove to the court that the individual for whom you're seeking guardianship needs a guardian. Because if you can't prove to the court by some medical documentation, I could grab Kelsey off the street and say, I want to be her guardian, and the court would say, why? So for a clinical team report, it's for developmentally disadvantaged individuals. So usually the parents and the caregivers become a little unsure of the development of the child. It usually happens as an infant or maybe before 2 years old, and then you need a clinical team report. The other kind of guardianship document is called a medical certificate. I'm going to put that up second, but first we're going to go through this one. And Kelsey, I'm hoping you can manage the chat for me, because I get really carried away with this and I don't want to get distracted.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so for a medical certificate, Mary, Roxy, Kelsey, and I go to a Red Sox game. We're talking about, you know, what we're doing in our professional life, and we're catching up and we're having beers and hot dogs and everything is just great. We leave the park before the game is ended. Somebody hits a home run and hits me in the head, and I go down and I'm in a coma. That is a medical certificate. It is good for 90 days. Kelsey files the paperwork to be my guardian. She gets temporary guardianship for 90 days. Why? I may come out of it. A clinical team report is usually and most often for an individual whose condition is not going to change. Okay, do I have everybody so far? We're good so far. Kelsey, any questions in the chat?
No, not yet. I'm following along. Carry
Okay.
on.
Okay, now the clinical team report, and I can tell you that if you do bankruptcy law and I gave you a clinical team report, you would not know what to do with it. So I don't want anybody to be intimidated by this. And the only reason I have any experience with this is because I do it all the time. Now, you don't have a docket number yet because you haven't filed your case. So for the division, let's say that you live in Boston. So you're going to file in Middlesex County, right? Okay, that is the only thing that you as a caregiver can do. That's it. You find out the county where you live, and you can even leave that blank. You are going to take this form, this clinical team report form, which you can download from Massachusetts Probate and Family Court, or you're going to give me a call before 9 o'clock at night, because that's when I go to sleep. You are going to call me at 617-833-3930, and you're going to ask me any questions you have about guardianship. So let's get that right out. Anything, I want to hear about it. Okay, so what does this say? This says there are 3 examination dates on here, people. You see that? We have a licensed psychologist. We have a registered physician, right? Could be pediatrics, could be neurology, and we have a date of examination. See that? And then we have a licensed social worker. Okay, here's the deal. You need to have 3 examination dates within 180 days. Here comes the problem. Let's say the licensed psychologist signs her portion on January 1st. Okay, what's 180 days approximately from January 1st? January, February, March, April, May, June. I'm getting June 30th, right? Okay, so we have a licensed social worker who signs it on May 1st. We have a physician who signs it on June 16th. This is a good clinical team report. Why? All examination dates were within 180 days of the first examination date. Now I'm expecting questions.
So I will just pause for clarity because there is a question in the chat, just looking for clarification. Does the individual have to be a certain age, 18 and under, so they can understand the guardianship, where you should start the process and who you would be applying for guardianship for?
Okay, very good. When you go to bed at night and on the eve of your 18th birthday, you go to bed when you're 17. You're still a minor. You wake up on your 18th birthday and you are an adult. All the care that you have given your family member who needs a guardian, you've done because that person has been a minor. They woke up 18, they're an adult. If they need someone to look after them and they need a guardian, that's when this kicks in.
Stephanie, why would just highlight again about, because you mentioned the form at play, the clinical team report, but just again for clarity, the difference between that moment and a moment not requiring that specific form is whether or not the disability you're talking about or the medical event is a permanent thing versus a temporary moment.
Well, yes, that is one way of saying it. Yes, I use the medical certificate because up until the time I went to that ball game, I had capacity to make my own decisions. Now, a lot of times, schizoaffective disorder kicks in when kids hit puberty. I've had some cases there where somebody has been fine up until 13 or 14. Then you would get a medical certificate. And sometimes if the doctor is unsure, they fill out, they have both done, a clinical team report and the medical certificate. And usually this is able to be done because every person I've ever worked with in our clinic at the Volunteer Lawyers Project has taken exquisite care of family members. So they have a physician. And if they don't have a social worker and they don't have a licensed clinical psychologist, it's the physician's job to help them get those two individuals. Now with the Boston Public School System, I'm not in the Boston Public School System, but I work with people there. So I'm going to say we have the most wonderful licensed independent clinical social worker, Tasha Bazerman. Okay. So then we're only left to get a licensed psychologist. There is a licensed psychologist for the Boston Public School System who works with Tasha Bazerman. So if you are in the Boston Public School System, you are very lucky. Even though we only have one of each, social worker and licensed clinical psychologist, these two individuals are fantastic. And Tasha Bazerman has filled out more clinical team reports than I think I've ever seen. So we're dealing with very experienced people here.
So if you don't mind, just a follow-up question that I'm seeing.
Yes,
please. Is how long in general does this whole process take? What's the turnaround time for a response? And then even before that, if someone's first thought was, well, I don't even have a doctor, in this case, a psychiatrist for their child or someone to start those kind of evaluative processes, would your advice be to start with you, or it sounds like you're saying to start with their school, if they need?
Well, I can tell you that I have worked with the Strive program at the Boston Public School System. Roxy, I'm sure you're familiar with them. They are fantastic. And I actually, before COVID, would go to the Boston Public School Systems in person and give this same talk. And I met the Strive people. My advice would be to that caregiver, the parent who knows that guardianship is in the offing, go to the Strive program, talk to any one of those Strive people. And again, if you have a difficulty, you call me, because I will call Strive and I will figure out what's going on.
Okay. And how long does how long can
Okay.
we expect
Good
to be
question.
in the process?
Okay, so we have our clinical team report, and there's a lot to this. So we've gone with our first page, and I'm going to give a quiz after I've distracted you. So we're going to come back to that first page, okay? Now we're going to go to the last page where it's signatures.
Stephanie, before you continue, may
Yes.
I just give an opportunity to Nalita, who's had her hand up for a while before
Yes.
some of those chat
Yes.
questions, to
Yes.
unmute her? Thank you. So Nalita, so you can speak live.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add I think to make it easier for some parents who may not, if your child is not involved in Strive. I know for my 2 older kids that I've done the guardianship, what's helpful is everyone knows in your school that you have a coordinator of special education. So those are the people who run the IEP meetings.
Okay.
It would be very easy and helpful if you go to them and just
Okay.
say you want to do the guardianship, and they can help you to find the licensed social worker and BPS who also will help you find the psychologist if you already don't have one. And then once you have those 2 set in place, and you know when the appointments are going to be, they will help facilitate that if you go to your special education coordinator. And then you can just check then with your child's doctor and say, okay, I need an appointment and I need it within this time so that I can meet that timeline. And that to me was the easiest way to get it done both times, was checking with the coast and having them help to do that legwork and get those people in to do that. And then checking with my daughter's doctor and making sure to get that appointment so that form everyone can fill it out within that 180 days.
Okay, Nalita, that is great. That is exactly what I want to hear. Is I can't do my job, which is helping until I have that clinical team report. And as you know, as a mom, I'm not a mom, but what can I tell you? I love guardianship. Everybody's got a job, right? So the job of the caretaker is to get this done for me. And the moment they have this, I want them to call me on the phone, 617-833-3930, and say, I've got a clinical team report. The moment that happens, I will find out a good number for you to call to get screened if you are eligible for Volunteer Lawyers Project. We are federally funded. There are financial guidelines. I can tell you that my colleagues work very, very hard to make sure people are financially eligible for our services. And again, if that doesn't work, call me again, because I will do my utmost to get this process going for you. Okay.
And before we unmute Giselle Wong with a question, I just want to be clear about, because this is the second question about when to do this, about the example that Stephanie gave is about the difference between, as a minor, you're responsible for your child. So the question about the 14-year-old with ASD and dyslexia reading on a 3rd grade level, the person's asking, do we file this as soon as the child turns 14?
No, your guardianship kicks in when the individual, and thank you for asking that question. Roxy, the guardianship kicks in when somebody turns 18. Here's what we suggest. Get the medical documentation done 2 months before the 18th birthday. 2 months, right? Because you have 180 days. So that 2-month deadline is going to be fine, correct? Because you've got 180 days to get those 3 signatures on the first page and get people to sign on the last page. 2 months out of the 18th birthday, you call me, or you go to vlpnet.org, which is the Volunteer Lawyers Project. You say, I need to get guardianship of a family member. They screen you for eligibility. You come to a clinic. I hope I'm lucky enough to work with you. now kicks in Kelsey's question, how long does this take? Well, COVID, COVID. If we have luck with the courts, we can e-file for you. If not, you can go down and take the documents, and they're a bunch. And I'm not going to do those tonight, but I will do them when you call me, when you're ready to go. You take the documents down to the court, or you snail mail them to the court. The court gives you a docket number, gets in touch with you, and you have a hearing. Now, all the hard work that you do is going to make that hearing go perfectly, because once you get in front of the judge and you've got all your paperwork done, and again, if you're eligible, I walk you through everything. It's probably going to take, I can't speak for the judge, I'm not one, at the most maybe 10 minutes. And people say, well, why does it go so fast? It's because you've done all the legwork. And then you've come to us and we help you with the pleadings, with all the other documents. Okay, let me
Stephanie,
get back.
one last question. This is a
Yes,
live
please.
question before
Yes.
you go on. Joselle, you're unmuted.
Hi, this is Joselle Wong's mother.
Hi.
And hi. And I was hearing about the guardianship from his doctor.
Uh-huh.
He was telling me about it, but I didn't understand exactly what it is.
Uh-huh.
And what the other woman was saying about the IEP, I'm so confused. Like, who do I actually talk to get the guardianship?
Nalita, do you want to go over again how that would work if this person's student is in the Boston Public School System, and then I'll take over from there? About the people, to special needs people at Boston Public School System.
I'm not sure I see.
She's on mute.
Okay.
Okay, give me 1 second to unmute her. You've been asked to be unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I guess it depends, the parent who asked the question, if your child is already old enough, first of all, like 18 or almost 18, then the person, if your child is on an IEP, so if your child gets special education services, then your child is on an IEP. So the person that handles that is the COAS, the coordinator of special education. And every school has one. That's the person that runs the IEP meeting. So whoever at your son's school, I think you said it was a son, runs the IEP meeting, that's the person that you can go to and say, I'm working on this. I know at my girls' school, they were helpful with that. And a lot of other schools, I've had other students, because I'm also a special ed teacher, where they will be helpful and say, okay, we can, you have the IEP, but you still need to get that clinical team report. You still need to get the licensed social worker. You still need to get the psychologist. And that coordinator, the person who runs the IEP meetings, can help you to get, can get in touch with that social worker for you that BPS has, and the psychologist, and they can come in and, help to do that evaluation. Some people already, like my kids also had independent, neuropsychs as well. And you can include that. I actually included that and gave to my kid's doctor, because she knew about, all their disabilities, but it helped her to be able to read those reports and say, okay, yes, I knew this, but that made sense. And she was able to, write a little bit in more detail because she had that. So I hope that answered the question. Is the person at your child's school who runs the IEP meetings, if your child has special needs and they're getting services, then they've had the meetings. And the person who runs that meeting can help you to find that social worker, as well as the psychologist, to help with doing that clinical team report for your child.
Thank you, Nalita. But we will have this recording. We will also have the presentations posted on our website so people can review it again and kind of take the information in. So the form Stephanie showed, she also did share it with us. So we'll have that form up so you can review it a little slower and contact her from there. So so thank you. Definitely, Kelsey, if you want to say that live, because I really want to thank everyone live. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Roxy. No, I just reiterate what Roxy said. Thank you so much. It's such a tremendous resource to have these folks with us, but then additionally to be able to know that you really can and should access them after the fact. They are welcoming you. And as Roxy said, all the details about how to contact them, how to actually talk about your personal situation and scenario will be on the website so that you can really follow up. And of course, we're here to, to get you in touch with those resources after the fact. But mostly an enormous thank you. I have learned so much myself. I was trying to both monitor the chat and then selfishly look out for notes as well, because this was just Stephanie, enormously helpful, and to Mary as well. So thank you to everyone. And I'm sure Roxy has, will conclude it, but much, much, much appreciated. And to everyone who joined.
Please know that we always appreciate your patience. Understand that sometimes things take a little longer with interpretation. And mostly thank you to the interpreters tonight. We always appreciate when you're able to be here and stay a few minutes longer and arrive early so we can get things set up. So thank you to the BPS employees, our speakers, and to our families that come out to listen. Please don't forget, May 6th next week, we'll have it on our website and we'll post it up. Come and let Desi know about concerns, issues in special education. These resources will be posted within the week, but make sure you also, if you can come out and speak and fill out the survey. If we want change, if we want things to be better, we have to make sure people hear our voices. So thank you all and have a wonderful night. Good night.